$5. That was all Nora Hartley had left in the world. The bill sat crumpled in her palm like a prayer nobody answered, worn thin from counting and recounting, from holding them up to the fluorescent lights of her apartment to make sure they were real. $5. After the hospital bills, after the rent, after the insulin for her mother's diabetes, after the groceries that never seemed to stretch far enough. $5 remained between her daughter and starvation. She stood in the employee break room of Mercy Care Home at 4 in the morning, still wearing her delivery uniform, the white polyester stained with coffee and gravy and the kind of exhaustion that settles into fabric the way it settles into bone. Her hands trembled as she folded the bills once, twice, 3 times. The clock on the wall ticked. It was always ticking. Time was the only currency Nora couldn't stretch, couldn't save, couldn't make last longer than God intended. In 7 days, the hospital would perform the surgery. 7 days. Emma's heart valve was failing, a defect she was born with, something Nora could not fix with love or sleepless nights or prayers whispered into the darkness. The surgery cost $125,000. $125,000. The number wasn't even real to her anymore. It might as well have been $1 billion. It might as well have been the moon. She had raised $37,000 so far. $37,000 over 3 years of double shifts, of eating other people's leftovers from the garbage bins because throwing away food felt like a personal insult when her daughter was hungry. $37,000 and 7 days remaining. The break room smelled like burnt coffee and broken dreams. A refrigerator hummed in the corner, the sound like a living thing barely holding on. Nora's phone buzzed. A text from the hospital, final payment required by midnight, 7 days from now, or the surgery will be rescheduled. Rescheduled meant delayed. Delayed meant Emma's heart would continue to fail, continue to strain, continue to weaken. The doctors said she had maybe 4 months left if the surgery didn't happen. They said it with their eyes full of pity, which was somehow worse than if they had said it with cruelty. She shoved the phone back into her pocket. Her shift began in 10 minutes. The delivery route started at the upscale restaurants on First Avenue, the ones where men in suits that cost more than her annual salary ordered wine she couldn't pronounce, ordered dishes that cost more than she spent on food in a week. Tonight, the snow had started falling 3 hours ago. The weather report called it a blizzard. The meteorologist on the news had said the word with the kind of reverence usually reserved for disasters. Visibility near zero. Roads closing by dawn. Wind gusts that could knock a person sideways. Nora pulled on her thin coat, the one she'd owned for 6 years, the one with the zipper that only worked halfway up. The cold wouldn't bother her. She had learned long ago that cold was just another kind of hunger. You could survive both if you didn't think too hard about it. The delivery van was already running in the parking lot, exhaust rising into the frozen darkness like a ghost trying to escape. Her supervisor, Rick, sat in the driver's seat drinking coffee from a thermos, his eyes on the weather radar on his phone. "Roads are bad," he said as she climbed in. "Real bad. Some restaurants are asking for deliveries early. Before it gets worse." Nora nodded. She didn't complain. Complaining was a luxury item. The van heater rattled as they drove. The wipers beat a rhythm against the accumulating snow. First Avenue stretched ahead of them, lined with the kinds of restaurants that had names in Italian and French, that had private booths and sommelier certifications and security cameras that watched everything. At 3:53 in the morning, they arrived at Vincenzo's, the most expensive Italian restaurant in Seattle. The kind of place where the owner's brother supposedly had connections to people connected to people nobody talked about in daylight. The kind of place where the wine glasses cost more than Nora's entire wardrobe. She grabbed the insulated delivery bag from the back, double-checked the order, pan-seared branzino, osso buco, risotto, and pushed through the heavy mahogany doors into a world that did not belong to her. The interior was all candlelight and darkwood, white tablecloths that looked soft enough to sleep on. The floor was black and white marble, polished to a mirror shine. A man stood behind the host stand, watching her with the careful gaze of someone trained to notice details. Security. Everything about his posture said security. "Back booth," he said without waiting for her to ask. "He's expecting it." Nora nodded and moved deeper into the restaurant, her wet shoes leaving marks on the marble floor she immediately regretted. The back booth was separated from the main dining area by dark velvet curtains. She pushed through them. The man sitting alone at the table was the kind of beautiful that made you forget to breathe. Tall, broad-shouldered, expensive in a way that had nothing to do with his clothes and everything to do with the way he carried himself. Dark hair silvered at the temples. Eyes the color of a storm approaching from across the ocean. A scar ran from his left eye to his cheekbone, thin and precise like someone had drawn it with intention. He wore a black suit, custom-tailored, the fabric the kind that draped with the weight of money. His white dress shirt was open at the collar. Gold watch on one wrist. Silver rings on his fingers. He didn't look up as she set the plates down. His hands were folded on the table, and she noticed they were trembling. In front of him sat a leather wallet, expensive leather, the kind that cost more than a month of Nora's rent. He stared at it like it was a weapon. "Sir, your order," she said quietly, setting the plates with the careful precision she'd learned in 100 shifts. He didn't respond. The silence stretched. The candlelight made his scar look deeper, more severe. Up close, she could see that he was beautiful and dangerous in the exact same way a blade is beautiful before it cuts. "Will there be anything else?" she asked. His eyes lifted to hers. For one moment, one single suspended moment, something in his expression cracked. Something raw and wounded and so human it made her chest hurt to witness it. Then it closed again. The armor returned. "No," he said, his voice like thunder heard from very far away. "Nothing else." She turned to leave, but something stopped her. Something in the way he stared at that wallet. She paused at the threshold of the velvet curtains, looking back at the man who sat alone in candlelight, surrounded by the kind of wealth that usually insulated people from the world. He looked alone in a way that had nothing to do with physical proximity. The wind had intensified outside. When Nora stepped back into the freezing night, it nearly knocked her backward. Snow swirled in patterns that made no sense, that moved like a living thing trying to find its way somewhere warm. The delivery bag was empty now, its purpose fulfilled. Rick was waiting in the van, the engine running, his hands wrapped around a styrofoam cup of coffee. "2 more stops," he said as she climbed in. "Then we're heading back. Roads are closing." Nora sat in the passenger seat and watched the snow accumulate on the windshield. The wipers beat their rhythm. The heater struggled against the cold. And somewhere in the back of her mind, the number lived. $125,000. 7 days remaining. She thought of Emma at home, asleep in her small bed, her small heart beating its irregular rhythm beneath her ribs. She thought of the $5 in her pocket. She thought of the man in the back booth, staring at a wallet like it contained the answer to a question nobody had asked. The van turned left, away from downtown, toward the neighborhoods where the restaurants served cheaper food to cheaper people. The snow continued to fall. The clock continued to tick. And somewhere in the darkness of a Seattle morning, time was running out for a little girl with a failing heart and a mother with $5 and the kind of desperation that makes people do things they would never have imagined doing before. For days earlier, the fluorescent lights of Mercy Care Home hummed their relentless hum, a sound like insects trapped in a dying bulb, and Nora Hartley stood at the staff station with her time card in trembling hands. 26 years old but looking at least a decade older, her dark hair pulled back so tightly it seemed to stretch the skin at her temples, her eyes rimmed with the purple black of someone who had not slept in days. The disinfectant smell hung thick and chemical, mixing with the sour stench of overcooked vegetables from the kitchen, a smell that had burrowed into her clothes and hair so deeply that she carried it home with her. Mrs. Chen, her supervisor, handed her an envelope without looking at her. The older woman never looked anymore. Looking meant seeing, and seeing meant feeling something, and there was no room for that in a place where people came to wait for the end. Nora opened the envelope with her thumb. The paycheck inside was for $847. $847 for 12-hour shifts, for helping people who could no longer help themselves, for showering bodies that trembled with disease, for holding hands of the dying. She pulled out her phone with the cracked screen, the phone she had stopped fixing because fixing it meant money she did not have. Her banking app opened. Her fingers moved. She transferred $842 to Seattle Children's Hospital, watching the number drain from her account and flow somewhere she could not reach it, somewhere that would sit in a payment portal with her name attached and her daughter's name underneath. The remaining balance glowed on the screen. $5. $125,000 was what Emma needed. 7 days was what they had left. Emma's surgeon had been clear, his voice steady and professional and absolutely final. The valve would decompensate. The window was closing. After 7 days, surgery would come too late. A 6-month-old girl with a congenital heart defect and a single mother who had already sold everything that could be sold, who had borrowed from every source that would lend, who was now $5 away from absolute nothing. Nora stood in the staff break room and ate leftover mashed potatoes from a meal tray, cold, standing over the sink because sitting down required energy she did not have. The potatoes tasted like nothing. Her tongue had forgotten what food was supposed to taste like. Around her, other staff members moved through their routines. Nobody spoke to her. This too had stopped a week ago, when she had become visibly what she had always been, desperate. Desperation was contagious in its way. People moved around it like water around a stone. Her co-worker Janet appeared in the doorway, a young woman with kind eyes and a wedding ring that caught the light. Janet had asked her 3 times if she was okay. Nora had lied 3 times. "I'm fine," she said now, not looking up from the potatoes. "Just tired." Janet withdrew. The lie had created distance, as lies do, but the truth would have created something worse, pity, and then help that could not be given, because there was no help for this. There was only the waiting, and the clock, and the number that lived in her chest like a second heartbeat. The cold outside Seattle hit like a physical blow when she stepped through the employee entrance. The blizzard had intensified. Snow fell in sheets so thick that the parking lot disappeared 3 feet ahead, the world becoming a white void where direction meant nothing. Wind howled across the pavement, the sound of something alive and violent. The thermometer on the wall read 19 degrees Fahrenheit, but with the wind, the cold was far worse than that. It was the kind of cold that made fingers go numb in minutes, the kind that turned exposed skin white and then purple and then dead-looking. Nora's second job uniform hung in her car, already waiting. Red jacket with a white logo for Mercy Meals, a delivery service that brought prepared food to homebound clients across Seattle. The job paid $14 per hour with no benefits, and it was the only thing that stood between her and complete financial collapse. She had been doing both jobs for 18 months now, ever since Emma's diagnosis, ever since the insurance company had sent its letter of denial in a white envelope that felt heavier than stone. She loaded the insulated delivery bags into her beat-up Honda, a 2009 model with 300,000 miles on it and a check engine light that never turned off anymore. The engine started on the 3rd try, reluctant in the cold. The heater struggled to produce warmth, blowing air that felt only slightly less cold than the air outside. Nora pulled out into the blizzard. The roads were already sealing. Other cars moved slowly, their headlights glowing like underwater lights through the falling snow. Nora had 5 deliveries tonight, and the traffic meant that each one would take longer, and the longer they took, the further behind she would fall, and falling behind meant not completing her full route, and not completing her route meant losing the bonus that only came with perfect completion. The math of survival was always doing more with less, moving faster on empty, stretching a body past what bodies could survive. The first delivery was to an elderly man in Ballard. The second was a duplex in Fremont where a woman answered the door coughing, clearly contagious, clearly in no condition to cook for herself. The third was a group home for developmentally disabled adults. Nora's hands were numb by the 4th stop. She could no longer feel her fingers against the insulated bags. The 5th address was different. It was an upscale neighborhood, the kind where the houses sat back from the street, where cars cost more than her apartment building, where there was something in the air that felt like judgment. The restaurant was called Calabrese, an Italian place with dark windows and valet parking even in weather like this. The address in her delivery system indicated an order for pickup. Someone inside had ordered takeout to be delivered elsewhere, and her route had her picking it up and delivering it to a residential address 5 miles away. She parked in the street, as employees were not allowed to use the valet. The insulated bag was waiting inside, warm and heavy, prepared by the kitchen. As she walked back to her car, moving through the blizzard with her head down against the wind, something dark caught her eye against the white snow. Something that should not have been there, something foreign to the chaos of white. She stopped. The wind pushed at her back, trying to move her forward, trying to keep her moving. But she stopped. The object was half buried. A wallet. Black leather, expensive, the kind that held the weight of money and cards and power. She picked it up, her numbed fingers struggling with the leather. The snow had not damaged it. Expensive leather repels weather the way money repels consequence. She opened it. The cash inside took her breath away. Stacks of bills. The interior was dark and warm and smelled of garlic and rosemary and something older, something that belonged to the building itself. The lighting was low, candles flickering on tables where couples sat close together and men in expensive suits discussed things in voices meant to carry power. At a booth in the back, visible through the darkness but somehow always visible, was a man. He sat alone, which was strange for a place like this. He was tall, the kind of tall that made the booth seem small, with broad shoulders that strained against a black silk shirt open at the throat, the kind of shirt that cost more than Nora's monthly rent. His hair was dark, silvered at the temples, and his face bore a scar that ran from the corner of his left eye down to his jawline, a permanent line that divided his features into before and after. His hands were large, scarred themselves, the hands of someone who had worked for everything he had before he had it given to him. His eyes were the color of a winter sky, storm gray and penetrating, and he stared at a small object on the table in front of him as if it contained the secrets of creation. Nora approached the booth. Her heart moved into her throat, making swallowing difficult. This man was not the kind of man you approached without permission. Something in the air around him made that clear. Something in the way the other people in the restaurant had positioned themselves, keeping distance, keeping their eyes forward. But she approached anyway, because she had just learned that the moment before you make a decision can stretch into forever if you think too long about it. "Excuse me," she said, and her voice came out smaller than she had intended, barely a whisper above the ambient noise of the restaurant. "I found this outside." She placed the wallet on the table in front of him. It landed with a soft sound of leather against wood. He looked at it without moving. His hand did not reach for it. He simply looked, and his looking was somehow more intense than if he had thrown it across the room or called for security. His gaze lifted from the wallet to her face, and she felt it like a physical thing, like a weight settling on her chest. "In the blizzard," he said. His voice was deep and solid like an oath, like the sound a stone makes when it hits the bottom of a well after falling for a very long time. "You returned it. During a blizzard. When you could have simply walked away." "It was not mine," Nora said. The words came out without her permission, obvious and small and stupid. He reached for the wallet. His movements were controlled, deliberate, each motion purposeful and economical. He opened it, and his entire body went absolutely still. The photograph was visible from across the table, visible and unbearable, visible in the way that broken things are visible. She did not know what she had done. She did not know what the photograph meant. She knew only that something in this man's face had changed when his eyes fell on it, something ancient and carefully contained had shifted, and for just a moment, the ice around him had cracked. "What is your name?" he asked. His eyes remained on the photograph. "Nora," she said. "Nora Hartley." Outside, the blizzard continued its work, sealing the roads, closing the city, making the world smaller and more isolated. Inside the restaurant, candles flickered. And in that moment, two people from entirely different worlds had collided in a way that neither of them understood yet, but both of them felt in the place where fate makes its decisions. The marble floor of Calabrese restaurant gleamed under golden chandelier light, pristine and untouched by the blizzard raging outside. Snow fell in thick sheets against the floor-to-ceiling windows, and the warmth inside felt like stepping into another world. The smell of garlic, rosemary, and aged wine hung heavy in the air, mixing with the scent of fresh bread pulled from an oven somewhere in the kitchen's hidden depths. Nora Hartley stood near the entrance, dripping melted snow onto that perfect marble, a cheap delivery uniform clinging to her thin frame. Her hands trembled, though whether from cold or fear, she could not say. The wallet felt impossibly heavy in her grip, as if the simple leather object had grown 10 times its weight during the drive here. The hostess approached, high heels clicking against the floor like a countdown clock. She was the kind of woman who made her living noticing what people wore, and her eyes swept across Nora's uniform with the efficiency of someone appraising garbage. "Can I help you?" The question landed more like an accusation. "I found this outside," Nora said, extending the wallet. Her voice came out barely a whisper, trembling like a candle in the wind. "In the snow. I think it belongs to someone here." The hostess took the wallet without touching Nora's skin, as if poverty might be contagious. She opened it, and her face drained completely of color. Her mouth opened and closed without sound. Then she turned and disappeared into the back of the restaurant, moving faster than her heels should have allowed. 60 seconds crawled past. Nora counted them. Each one felt like a small eternity. Then the heavy velvet curtain separating the private booths from the main dining room pulled open with deliberate slowness. The man who emerged was 42 years old but seemed to contain the weight of decades. 6'3", with broad shoulders that made the charcoal suit look like it had been painted on him. His hair was salt and pepper, swept back from his face with the precision of someone accustomed to control. A scar ran through his left eyebrow, a thin white line that somehow made his face more dangerous rather than less. His eyes were dark, so dark they seemed to reflect no light at all, and when they found Nora's face, she felt something ancient and carefully contained shift in her chest. This was Giovanni Calabrese. Enzo and Luca emerged behind him like shadows gaining substance. They moved with the practiced ease of men who had stood in this exact formation 1,000 times before, hands resting near their jackets where the weight of guns sat beneath expensive fabric. Neither of them wore expressions. Their faces were blank as winter sky. Giovanni walked toward Nora slowly, each step measured and controlled, the way a general might survey a battlefield he already owned. He stopped 3 feet away. Close enough that she could see the gold watch on his wrist, expensive beyond anything she could comprehend. Close enough that she could hear him breathing, steady and deliberate as a heartbeat carved from stone. He reached out his hand. Nora placed the wallet in his palm. His fingers closed around it. He opened it without looking at her, and for a moment that stretched like taffy, he did not move. His eyes found the photograph, the one she could not see from where she stood, and his entire body went rigid. The scar on his eyebrow seemed to deepen, or perhaps it was just the light, or perhaps it was her own fear making everything sharper and more terrible. "In the blizzard," he said finally. His voice was deep and solid like an oath, like the sound a stone makes when it hits the bottom of a well after falling for a very long time. "You returned it. When you could have simply walked away." "It was not mine," Nora said. The words came out without her permission, small and obvious and stupid. He looked at her. His eyes moved across her face like a blade, taking in the exhaustion, the bruises on her neck that were beginning to fade to yellow, the way her hands shook even though she was trying to hold them still. Something shifted in his expression, barely perceptible, but Enzo caught it. Luca caught it. Both men exchanged a glance that carried weight. "What is your name?" Giovanni asked. "Nora," she said. "Nora Hartley." He nodded once, as if her name had confirmed something he already knew. Most people would have kept the cash. He pulled out $500 bills from his wallet, the movement economical and precise. He extended them toward her. "Take it." Nora's eyes widened. $500 was more than she made in 3 days. $500 was the difference between eating and rationing. $500 was a miracle wearing a price tag. She shook her head. "I don't want a reward." The word seemed to surprise him. Enzo and Luca exchanged another look, this one carrying more shock. In 15 years of working for Giovanni Calabrese, they had not seen this. They had not seen him offer money and have it refused. Nora continued, her voice steadier now, as if saying the truth out loud had given her some small measure of courage. I see that photograph every day in the hospital room. I sit with Mrs. Patterson while the nurses check her vitals, and she holds that same kind of picture, one of her husband, and she talks about how much she misses him. I thought maybe that picture was important to someone. I thought maybe it mattered. Giovanni's jaw tightened. He lowered the bills slightly but did not withdraw them completely. You work in a hospital. Mercy care home, Nora said. Day shift usually. Double shifts when I can pick up the hours. Why? The question was simple, but it seemed to ask for everything. Why she worked. Why she persisted. Why she had returned a wallet she could have kept. My daughter, Nora said. Her eyes filled with tears she did not allow to fall. She needs surgery. She has a heart condition. The surgery costs $125,000 and we have 6 days before the deadline, or she. She could not finish the sentence. Outside, the blizzard continued its work, sealing the roads, closing the city, erasing the world one snowflake at a time. Inside the restaurant, candles flickered in their glass holders, casting shadows that seemed to move with intention. Giovanni stared at Nora for a very long moment. His hand was still extended, the bills visible and untaken. Thank you, he said finally. Nora Hartley. She turned and left, her delivery uniform still dripping water onto his marble floor. She did not know that he watched her go. She did not know that the moment the door closed behind her, his hand crumpled into a fist, the $500 still clutched inside it. She did not know that Enzo stepped forward immediately and whispered, "Boss? You want us to?" And Giovanni's response came out like a command carved from ice. Find out everything about her. Everything. As Nora drove away into the blizzard, her ancient Honda making sounds like an animal in pain, Giovanni remained standing exactly where he was. The photograph in his other hand showed a woman with dark hair and kind eyes, holding an infant who had never taken a breath. His wife, Maria. His son, who had died in her womb 8 years ago, along with any softness Giovanni Calabrese believed he might still possess. The photograph had been in his wallet for 2,920 days. He had looked at it perhaps 1,000 times. But he had never imagined it would be returned to him by a girl in a delivery uniform who asked for nothing. At 6:11 in the morning, Nora arrived at Mercy Care Home for her shift. The building was old, constructed sometime in the 1970s, and the hallway smelled like antiseptic and something underneath it that no amount of cleaning could erase. The smell of people at the end of their lives, she sometimes thought. The smell of time running out. She pushed the medication cart down the 3rd-floor hallway, moving slowly because her body had begun to rebel against the double shifts. Her back ached. Her feet screamed. The $5 in her wallet felt like a joke, a cruel punishment for believing she might survive the week. Room 14. Mrs. Patterson sat in her chair by the window, watching the snow fall. She was 87 years old and had been at Mercy Care for 3 years, ever since her hip broke and her daughter moved to Portland and could no longer afford the rent on her mother's small house. She was thin, almost translucent, as if the world was slowly erasing her pencil by pencil. "Good morning, dear," Mrs. Patterson said. "You look absolutely terrible. Have you slept?" "I slept," Nora lied, checking the blood pressure cuff on the wall, the pulse oximeter, the small rituals of care that filled her days. "No, you didn't." Mrs. Patterson reached out and took Nora's hand. Her grip was surprisingly firm for someone so fragile. "You have kind eyes, Nora. I see it every time you come in here. But there's something underneath them. Something you're carrying. Whatever it is, it's not yours to carry alone." Nora's eyes filled with tears she had no time to shed. She squeezed Mrs. Patterson's hand gently and moved on to the next room, the next set of vitals, the next small hour of the long day. At 6 p.m., when her shift ended and her next job was supposed to begin, she walked to her car in the parking lot. The snow had stopped briefly, leaving the world white and silent and cold. A black Mercedes was parked directly next to her ancient Honda. Giovanni Calabrese leaned against the driver's door, and Enzo and Luca stood 10 feet back, their posture casual but their presence absolute, like gravity-made material. Nora froze. Her keys fell from her hand. "I want to talk to you about your daughter," Giovanni said. His voice was calm, but it was the calmness of someone accustomed to being obeyed. "How do you?" Nora began. "I make it my business to know things," he said. "Your daughter needs surgery. $125,000. You have 6 days to make the deadline. After that, there is no surgery." Nora's hands trembled. "That's none of your concern." Giovanni stepped closer, closing the distance between them to less than a foot. Up close, the scar on his eyebrow was even more visible, a white line that seemed to split his face into 2 territories of darkness. "What if I told you I could pay for it? All of it. Today." Nora stared at him. She stared and stared, waiting for the punchline, the catch, the hidden cost of the words he had just spoken. This was the Mafia. She knew that much, even though she had tried not to see it. Men did not offer $125,000 without expecting something devastating in return. "Why would you help me?" she whispered. "I'm nobody." And something changed in his face. It was subtle, barely visible, but it was there. A softening at the corners of his eyes. A slight relaxation of his jaw. Enzo and Luca noticed immediately, exchanging looks of absolute shock because in 15 years, they had never seen Giovanni Calabrese show this expression. "Because you returned something that mattered to me," he said, "when you had every reason to keep it. Because you're trying to save your daughter and no child should die because of money." Nora's eyes filled with tears that would not be held back this time. They fell freely, streaming down her cold cheeks. "I can't accept that. I could never pay you back." "I'm not asking you to," Giovanni said. He pulled out his phone. His fingers moved across the screen with practiced efficiency. He pulled up his banking application, the one that showed accounts with numbers too large for Nora to comprehend. "What's the hospital account number?" he asked. Nora pulled out her own phone with shaking hands. She had memorized the number weeks ago. She read it to him, each digit a small prayer. Giovanni typed. He hit a button. And then he turned the phone toward her. The screen showed one word, transfer complete. Below it, the amount, $125,000. Nora's knees buckled. She caught herself against her car, her hand pressing against the cold metal. The sobs came then, from somewhere deep inside her, from the place where hope had been buried for so long she had almost forgotten what it felt like to dig it up. "Why?" she whispered. "Why would you do this?" Giovanni's voice dropped to barely audible. "Because 8 years ago, my wife died in childbirth. I couldn't save her. And I swore no child would die if I had the power to stop it." But what neither of them knew, what neither could have guessed as they stood in that parking lot surrounded by falling snow and the sounds of the city, was that 300 feet away, parked in a dark truck with tinted windows, Douglas Hale sat watching. Douglas Hale was 31 years old and built like the weapon he had been trained to be. Ex-military. Dishonorable discharge. A scar on his knuckles from the last time he had hit Nora hard enough to draw blood. Cold blue eyes that had looked at her with love once, or something that had worn love's mask, before the mask had slipped and revealed the rage underneath. He sat in his truck with binoculars raised to his eyes, watching as Giovanni pressed his phone into Nora's hands. Watching as she cried. Watching as another man touched her shoulder. Rage filled his chest like poison filling a cup. The text message came to Nora's phone at 11:43 p.m., after Emma's successful surgery, after the surgeon had emerged from the operating room with good news, after Nora had collapsed into her sister's arms in the waiting room and wept tears of gratitude that seemed to contain all the fear she had been carrying. Unknown number, Emma is beautiful. It would be a shame if something happened to her. D. The phone fell from Nora's hand. And in that moment, in the hospital waiting room where the fluorescent lights hummed like trapped bees, everything shifted. The threat was no longer abstract. It was not something to be managed or endured. It was present and real and directed at the one thing that mattered more to her than her own survival. It was directed at her child. The rain falls like needles, each drop sharp and cold against skin. Nora Hartley lies on the freezing pavement, blood mixing with water, her breath coming in gasps that sound like drowning. One eye is swelling shut. Her throat bears the shape of hands, dark purple fingerprints blooming across her skin like flowers that only grow in violence. Her ribs scream. Her lip is split. She tastes copper and rain. She reaches for her phone with trembling fingers, vision blurred, body shaking so hard her teeth chatter uncontrollably. The screen is slick with blood. Her banking app opens, $11. 11. Not enough for an emergency room. Not enough for anything except the terrible arithmetic of survival. The rain pounds harder. Nora closes her eyes. She thinks about Emma, safe in the hospital bed, recovering. She thinks about giving up. About how easy it would be to just stop fighting. To let Douglas win. To disappear into the cold Seattle night and never come back. Then her phone buzzes. A photo from her sister. Emma awake, smiling, tiny fingers wrapped around a stuffed bear with button eyes. That smile. That small, perfect smile that survived surgery and anesthesia and the machinery of modern medicine. Nora's breath catches. She doesn't think. She just moves. Her fingers find a contact she saved 3 weeks ago but never called. Giovanni Calabrese. She hits dial. He answers on the first ring. Always answers on the first ring, as if he has been waiting for her to call, as if some part of him has been expecting this moment. She whispers through broken teeth, "Help me." 15 minutes passes like an hour. Nora lies on the cold ground, counting her heartbeats, wondering if this is how it ends. If Douglas was right. If nobody comes. Then the sound arrives before she sees anything, a car engine, expensive and powerful, cutting through the rain-soaked night like a blade. Tires screech. A black Mercedes stops hard, taillights blazing red. Giovanni emerges first. Enzo and Luca behind him. They move like shadows, like men who have been trained to appear and disappear without being seen. Giovanni sees Nora on the ground. He sees the blood. He sees the handprint bruises on her throat like a signature of cruelty. And his face, his beautiful, controlled, ice-cold face, transforms into something that has never existed before in his 38 years. Something terrifying. Something that looks like a man whose world has just caught fire. He kneels beside her, his expensive Armani suit soaking through with rain and blood. He cradles her head like she is made of glass, like she is the most precious thing he has ever held. Who did this? His voice is not loud. His voice is barely above a whisper. But it sounds like the moment before lightning strikes. Nora whispers, "Douglas Hale. My ex. He's been." Giovanni cuts her off, voice lethal and calm, "I know who he is now." Enzo already pulled his file. He looks at Luca, "Find him. Bring him to the warehouse on 3rd and Pike. Don't let him see you coming." To Enzo, "Call Dr. Rossi. Have him meet us at my penthouse. Bring everything he needs." He lifts Nora like she weighs nothing, like gravity has no claim on her, carries her to the car. Enzo opens the rear door. Giovanni slides in, cradling her against his chest, one hand gentle on her head. As they drive through downtown Seattle, Nora fades in and out. The city lights blur and separate. Giovanni's voice reaches her through the darkness, steady and low, "You're safe now. I promise you, he will never touch you again. Not ever." She hears that promise. She holds on to it like a prayer. 3 hours later, the warehouse on 3rd and Pike. Douglas Hale sits tied to a chair, arms behind him, thick rope cutting into his wrists. His face is bloodied. His left eye is swollen. But he is alive. He is conscious. He understands what is about to happen. 12 men in black tactical gear surround him. Not police. Not law enforcement. Men who answer to Giovanni Calabrese, men who have spent years learning how to make problems disappear. Giovanni stands in front of Douglas, expression carved from ice. The scar on his cheekbone catches the warehouse light. Douglas tries to bluster, tries to find his voice. "You can't do this. I have rights. I'll." "Giovanni, you beat a woman who showed you nothing but kindness. You threatened a child." "A child, Douglas. There are no rights here. Only consequences." Douglas's bluster collapses. He trembles like a cornered animal, like prey that has just understood it will not survive the night. He begins to beg. "Please. Please, I was just angry. I didn't mean." Giovanni nods to Enzo. But what neither man knows is that Margaret Harrington has also learned about the attack. Her network is vast. Her sources are everywhere. She arrives at the warehouse 40 minutes later, 3 Harrington family soldiers flanking her like guards. Margaret Harrington is 52 years old and moves like a woman who has never been told no. Diamond earrings catch the fluorescent lights. Her suit costs more than Nora's car. Her smile is sharp enough to cut. She finds Giovanni in the warehouse office, watching Douglas through one-way glass. "I want him," Margaret says. Not a question. A demand. Giovanni turns to face her, his hours. Margaret steps closer. "No. He's mine. The Hale family has been a problem for my organization for years. Douglas was always the weak link. Let me have him. In exchange, I owe you a favor. A real one. From the Harringtons." Silence fills the space between them. The kind of silence that means two powerful people are negotiating the fate of a human being like he is a chess piece, like his life has no weight except as currency. Giovanni considers. He thinks about Nora. About Emma. About the promise he made in the car. He nods. "He's yours. Do what you want. Just make sure he's never seen again." Margaret smiles, cold and certain. "Oh, he won't be. Not by anyone who matters." Douglas Hale screams as Harrington soldiers drag him from the chair. He screams as they haul him toward the loading dock. He screams into the warehouse darkness, his voice swallowed by the sound of rain against metal walls. Then he is gone. What happens to him after is the kind of thing people whisper about. Some say the Harringtons sent him overseas, to a private facility where people learn that screaming does no good. Some say they erased him completely, changed his face, gave him a new name, made him disappear into the criminal underworld where nobody asks questions. Some say he's still alive somewhere, in some dark place, learning every day what it means to cause pain and then experience it return tenfold. What matters is this: Douglas Hale is never seen again in Seattle. He is never seen again anywhere. Simultaneously, Giovanni ensures that every police report Nora filed is escalated to federal authorities. Officer Harold Brennan, the one who took her statement with a bored expression, is suspended pending investigation for obstruction of justice and corruption. Federal investigators discover his history, other women, other complaints, a pattern of protection that suggests deeper rot. And Margaret Harrington receives anonymous evidence of her family's connections to Douglas, connections that go deeper than anyone realized. Her social standing fractures. Her charities ask her to step down. Her name disappears from benefit galas and society pages. Reputation is currency in her world, and her currency has been spent. Meanwhile, at Giovanni's penthouse, Dr. Rossi works for 6 hours straight. He sets Nora's ribs with careful hands. He applies ice to her swollen eye. He treats the lacerations on her throat with salves that smell like honey and healing. When he is finished, He turns to Giovanni. She will recover fully. The injuries are severe but not permanent. Rest. Pain medication. 24-hour observation. Beyond that, time. Giovanni nods. Dr. Rossi leaves. Nora wakes in a bed so soft it feels like sleeping on clouds. The penthouse windows frame the Seattle skyline, lights reflecting off Puget Sound like stars fallen into water. She reaches for the call button, but Giovanni is already there, sitting in a chair beside her bed, watching her sleep. He has not moved all night. "How do you feel?" His voice is gentle now, the lethal calm replaced by something that sounds almost like tenderness. Nora tries to speak, but her throat is too damaged. She touches her neck. Giovanni helps her sip water through a straw. Cold water against her broken mouth. Relief. She manages. "How long have I?" 14 hours. "You needed the sleep." Emma. "Safe. Recovering. I spoke to your sister this morning." Emma is awake. "She asked about you." "I told her you are safe." Nora's eyes fill with tears. Not from pain. From gratitude. From the terrible understanding that she has been saved by a man who owes her nothing, a man whose world intersected with hers because she picked up a leather wallet in the snow. She reaches for Giovanni's hand. He takes it. Outside, the rain continues to fall on Seattle, cold and relentless, washing the city clean. 1 year later, the Seattle skyline glows gold in the fading light, and the penthouse windows of Giovanni Calabrese frame the city like a painting in a museum that costs more than most people earn in a lifetime. Nora Hartley stands at the glass, her silhouette still and small against the vastness of the sky, her reflection ghostly in the dark panes. She wears a simple cream-colored dress, elegant without trying, hair pulled back in a way that reveals the soft curve of her neck where bruises used to bloom like flowers in hell. Confidence lives in her posture now. It was not always there. The last 12 months unfolded quietly, like pages turning in a book nobody was rushing to finish. Giovanni paid for her nursing degree, every tuition bill, every textbook, every exam fee. He did not announce it. He did not demand gratitude. His people simply appeared with enrollment papers, with a job waiting at Harborview Medical Center, with promises that she would never worry about money again. Nora took the opportunities like a person learning to breathe after drowning. She moved into a safe apartment in a building where the locks worked and the neighbors did not pound on the walls. She slept without nightmares, most nights. Emma grew, fat-cheeked and laughing, 18 months old now, healthy enough to dance when music played. But Giovanni stayed away. Messages came through Enzo, always formal, always distant. The boss asks if Emma is healing well. The boss has ensured her medical care will continue indefinitely. The boss wishes you peace. Nora read them and felt something break inside her chest, a small clean fracture that would not heal because the bone was not breaking, the bone was just remembering what it felt like to be whole. She did not try to contact him. She told herself it was better this way. A man like that belonged in a world of violence and darkness, and she was learning to live in light. Tonight, an invitation arrived on cream cardstock so expensive it felt like touching clouds. A charity gala. Harborview's Pediatric Heart Surgery Fund. Held at the Calabrese penthouse. When Nora arrived an hour ago, she moved through crowds of Seattle's elite like a ghost, a woman still learning how to be seen. The dedication plaque beside the ballroom doors stopped her breath. In memory of Maria Calabrese and in honor of Emma Hartley. Underneath, a figure, $500,000 committed to free surgeries for children whose families had nothing left. She excused herself, found her way to the windows, and stood alone with the city breathing below her. Footsteps. Measured. Deliberate. The sound of a man who has learned to announce himself through nothing but the weight of his presence. Giovanni Calabrese stood 10 feet away, separated by space that felt like an ocean. His tuxedo was black, tailored, the white shirt beneath unbuttoned at the collar to show the strong line of his throat. His hair had silvered at the temples since she last saw him, as if the last year had aged him in all the ways money could not prevent. But his eyes were different. They were still dark, still dangerous, but something in them had softened like wax in warmth. Something human. "You came," he said. "I didn't know it was you," Nora replied. "The invitation said the Calabrese Foundation. I didn't think you would be here. I have been here all night, watching the crowd. Waiting for you." His voice was low, the kind of voice that sounds like it is telling a secret even in a room full of people. "I was not certain you would come. I wondered if you were still angry with me for disappearing." Nora stepped closer. The space between them became smaller. "Why did you disappear?" "Because I thought you needed to heal without me. Without what I am. I told myself that proximity to my world would poison yours. I told myself 1,000 lies to justify keeping distance from the only person who has ever made me want to be better." He closed the space between them. Not quickly. Not with the aggression she had once seen in his movements. Slowly, as if asking permission with each step. "I returned a wallet," Nora said. "I did not save your life." "Yes, you did." Giovanni's jaw tightened, his dark eyes finding hers and holding them. "After Maria died, I became something hollow. A man made of money and threats and power that meant nothing because there was nothing left to protect. I moved through the world like a machine, like a ghost, like a perfectly programmed weapon. I did not feel. I did not hope. I did not believe in anything anymore." His voice cracked. "And then you walked into my restaurant, soaking wet, exhausted, worth nothing by the world's measure, and you returned something precious because it was the right thing to do. You did not know who I was. You did not want anything from me. You just cared. About a photograph of a dead woman you would never meet. That was the moment I remembered what it means to be human." Nora's eyes filled with tears that did not fall, tears held suspended like rain before it breaks into drops. "I have carried that with me every day for a year. Every morning I wanted to call you. Every night I wanted to appear at your apartment and tell you the truth. But I was afraid that if I said it out loud, if I came back into your life, I would drag you back into the darkness with me. And I could not do that. Not after everything you survived." "You were never the darkness," Nora whispered. Her voice trembled like a candle in the wind. "You were the miracle. You were the moment everything changed. You could have looked past Emma's surgery. You could have let Douglas destroy me. You could have done nothing, and you would have been just like everyone else. But you chose differently. You chose to be more than what your world taught you to be." Giovanni reached out. His hand, large and scarred, trembling slightly, moved toward her face. She did not pull back. His fingers brushed her cheek with the tenderness of a man touching something sacred. "How is Emma?" he asked. Nora smiled. "She is perfect. Healthy. She runs everywhere now, laughing. She understands words. She points at your photograph in the hallway of my apartment and tries to say your name." She pulled out her phone with shaking hands, showed him a video. Emma, fair-haired and bright-eyed, toddling across a living room floor, her laugh like bells. Giovanni's expression fractured. Tears spilled down his scarred cheekbones, and for the first time in 8 years, the man known as the Ice King of Seattle allowed himself to break in front of another person. "Thank you," he whispered. "For letting me be part of her story. For not keeping her from me." Nora took his hand. It was warm, solid, real in a way that dreams were not. "You are part of our story, Giovanni. However much or little you want to be. We are yours if you want us." He looked at their joined hands, then at her face, and something inside his chest that had been locked away since Maria's death turned the key and opened. In the months that followed, the city watched as Giovanni Calabrese transformed in ways that made no sense to the criminal underworld he ruled. He was seen in parks, a small child on his shoulders, her tiny hands gripping his dark hair. He sat in coffee shops for hours with Nora, not conducting business, just talking, just learning her again. He attended Emma's second birthday party and presented her with a stuffed bear so large it nearly toppled her over, her squealing laughter echoing through the apartment like proof that good things could grow in broken places. On a balcony at sunset, 2 years after the night he found her at the restaurant, Giovanni stood beside Nora and allowed himself to feel what he had been too afraid to speak aloud. His arm wrapped around her shoulders. Her head rested on his chest, above the heart that had learned to beat again. Below them, the city lights began their nightly transformation, one by one, until Seattle glowed like it was remembering what it meant to be alive. "I want to tell you something," Giovanni said. His voice was quiet, almost uncertain. "I have been carrying these words for months, waiting for the right moment. But I realize now that there is no right moment. There is only this one." Nora tilted her head to look at him. Giovanni reached into his jacket and withdrew a small velvet box. Inside, a diamond so clear it seemed to hold light inside itself. "I want to marry you, Nora Hartley. I want to wake up beside you every day for the rest of my life. I want to watch Emma grow, to be the man she calls father, to be the person you choose because you want me, not because I saved you. You saved yourself. You saved me. Will you marry me?" Nora said yes. The word came out as a sob, as a laugh, as a prayer finally answered. The wedding happened on a rooftop overlooking Puget Sound, small, private, just the people who mattered. Enzo cried. Luca smiled for the first time anyone could remember. Emma dropped flower petals and clapped at her own cleverness. When Giovanni kissed Nora, the sun was setting, and the sky was burning gold and crimson, like the world was celebrating their second chances. 2 years later, a foundation bearing the names of a dead woman and a living child opened its doors. The Maria and Emma Calabrese Foundation provided free surgeries for children whose families could not afford the price of hope. Giovanni and Nora ran it together. By year 5, they had saved 247 lives. This is what happens when darkness meets light. This is what happens when a man remembers he is human. This is what happens when a woman with $5 in her pocket teaches the world's most powerful man that kindness is the only currency that actually matters. People think miracles are loud, dramatic, movie moments with orchestral music. But sometimes miracles are quiet. A stranger who stops to help. A choice to do the right thing when no one is watching. A man who learned to feel again because someone showed him grace when he deserved none. A woman who refused to disappear, who picked herself up, who built a life from the rubble of her own survival. After the rain, the sky clears. And sometimes miracles come from the most unexpected places. If this story moved your heart, drop a like right now. Share it with someone who needs to believe in second chances. Subscribe because tomorrow we have another story that will remind you why kindness is never wasted, why miracles are real, why hope is always worth holding on to. Comment below, have you ever done something kind for a stranger that changed your life? Or has someone's kindness changed yours? I read every single comment. Tell me your story. Thank you for being here. Thank you for staying with us until the very end. We wish you good health, a joyful life, and days filled with peace and happiness. We will see you in the next video.